This is that ice cold Michelle fight for that white coat. This one for them hood girls, them good girls, straight masterpieces. Styling, wildin', living it up in the city. Got Chuck's on with Saint Laurent. Gotta kiss myself, I'm so pretty. I'm too hot. Call the police and the fireman. I'm too hot. Make a dragon wanna retire, man. I'm too hot. Say my name, you know who I am. I'm too hot. And my band bought that money. Break it down. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Come on. Don't believe me, just watch. 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 Hey, 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 oh! Stop. Wait a minute. Fill my cup, put some nigga in it. Take a sip, sign the check. Julio, get the stretch. Right to Harlem, Hollywood, Jackson, Mississippi. If we show up, we gon' show out. Smoother than a fresh drop skipping. I'm too hot. Call the police and the fireman. I'm too hot. Make a dragon wanna retire, man. I'm too hot. Tricks say my name, you know who I am. I'm too hot. And my band bought that money. Break it down. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Come on. Don't believe me, just watch. 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 Hey, 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 oh! Before we leave, let me tell y'all a little something. Uptown, funk you up. Uptown, funk you up. Uptown, funk you up. Uptown, funk you up. Come on, dance, jump on it. If you sexed and flown it. If you freak dead and own it. Don't brag about it, come show me. Come on, dance, jump on it. If you sexed and flown it. Well, it's Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe it, just watch. Come on. Don't believe me, just watch. 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 Hey, 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 oh!
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our 13th annual meeting. And I hope you all enjoyed our musical interlude. And I saw some of you out there trying to be all professional and not move to the beat. But Uptown Funk, that's my jam. Thank you, folks. Well, holy moly, it's been 13 years. And so much has changed and so much opportunity now greets us. As you will hear, WEC's goals are ambitious, and without our loyal partners, our ongoing work to achieve them would not be possible. I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors for this evening's event. First, our lead sponsors, Unibank and the United Way of Central Massachusetts. Our VIP sponsors, the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, the Hanover Insurance Group Foundation, and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Our partnering sponsors, Webster 5, UMass Chan Medical School, Lamoureux Pagano Associates, Architects, and National Grid. And our friend sponsors, Dresser and McGorthy LLP, and Sullivan Group Insurance and Risk Management Services. Special thanks to United Way of Central Massachusetts. Since before we officially opened for business in 2010, United Way has served as our fiscal sponsor and our home. Their generosity, which includes managing our essential administrative services, allows us to focus on driving success across our portfolio of work. Thanks to all in the suite. I would also like to acknowledge 2 leadership gifts in support of the collaborative. These gifts from the Eppinger Family Foundation, the Essler Family Foundation, serve as the bedrock and a launching pad and signal a special and deep partnership in the work towards education equity that centers our work. We deeply appreciate the investment that these 2 family foundations are making in WEC's growth. While offering a teaser this evening, in the coming days and weeks, you will hear more about this work, our existing and deepening partnerships, and our call for all those who are interested in our children and their growth to, as Bruno Mars so eloquently put it, as we just heard a few minutes ago, to show up and show out. Many thanks to Jeannie and John, Fred and Patty. As the result of the confluence of several events and trends, Worcester is at an inspiring and critical inflection point. We have a new and visionary superintendent of schools, new governance made possible as a result of statutory changes in the composition of the school committee, and a new and progressive orientation of the school committee, and an influx of funds as a result of the state Student Opportunity Act and federal recovery dollars. The work that we do, our choices, and the principles that guide those choices will affect the opportunities that our children have and the quality of life in our city for at least a generation. WEC has affirmed the core values and principles that will guide our work. Our new internal strategy, adopted by the board this year, states our mission clearly: to advance excellence and equity in education for all Worcester Public School students and work towards our vision of a transformational education community that enables all Worcester Public School students to achieve their full potential. That's a tall order, yet we make no apologies. Our children deserve excellence, and WEC is eager for the work through in-depth partnerships with allied organizations that is necessary to fulfill it. On our plate is the work to ensure equitable access to the resources, programs, and supports that lead to student success. By way of example, we are most excited about the collective impact work of the Worcester Education Equity Roundtable, a monthly gathering of those in the Worcester learning community, including representatives from the district, youth serving organizations, arts, ethnic cultural organizations, parent groups, and higher education, all who are working on the evolution of an education ecosystem in our city. Special thanks to the nearly 40 organizations who are part of this critical and essential work. Our second strategy is a focus on learning opportunities for greatest impact. A continuing focus for WEC is a targeted set of programs promoting student success. Our longstanding Reading Together program, in place in 7 of our district's elementary schools, reaches over 1,300 students and their families, bringing them new, curated, high-quality books and reading extension activities. Our newest program, WULabs reaches nearly double the number of students in grades K through 6, bringing project-based learning to 11 out-of-school time partner sites. In addition, we are excited to be part of statewide efforts to expand access to early college as a tool towards equity. Our strategic plan also includes a focus on inclusive and whole child approaches to teaching and learning. The pandemic has driven home the impact of the reality of which all who work with children were aware: the importance of social and emotional and trauma-informed practices to young people's development. A continuing strategic initiative is our work in the area of trauma and learning. Initially seeded through the Worcester Hears project, this work has expanded to include training for those beyond the classroom: youth development workers, child welfare professionals, summer counselors, and out-of-school time educators, and includes modules that probe emerging work in moral injury and moral offense, along with racism as trauma. A strategy central to our work centers on building an engaged community. We firmly believe that our enterprise in education requires an active, well-informed, and well-engaged community. With partners based in Worcester, across the Commonwealth, and indeed nationally, we participate in and catalyze networks for this type of learning and this critical type of action. These networks offer the expertise and platforms to understand and disseminate best practices and to engage the full ecosystem: parents, providers, the district, policymakers, and leaders across the business, civic, and nonprofit communities in the full scope of work on behalf of our children. Since its inception, WEC has considered itself a critical friend both to the Worcester Public Schools and our community. By critical friend, I mean the friend who will root for you when you're doing well and who will also ask, is that really what you're going to wear when necessary? An important WEC strategy is the support for leadership at 20 Irving Street, on the school committee, and in the community. Support that recognizes and acts to assure that the needs of students are paramount. This brings me back to our first point. We are at an inflection point, a once in a generation moment when genuine, meaningful change is possible. It is a time for us together to courageously identify our weaknesses, to celebrate our many, many successes, and to seek, or if necessary, to craft our opportunities. We each have a part in this. As you lean into our program today, we invite you to think about where you fit into this larger ecosystem. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to lob it over to our new board chair, Kim Davenport. Kim.
Thank you, Jennifer. It is an honor to be with you tonight and to share a small glimpse into the big work that WEC and its partners do to advance excellence and equity in education for Worcester students. During the early months of the pandemic, a committed group of leaders from across the community embarked on a journey together. Their mission: take collective action to ensure all of Worcester students had equitable access to the resources, services, and high-quality programs they needed to thrive. The Worcester Education Equity Roundtable, or WEIR, was formed and swiftly aligned its work to identify and address critical priorities. During this past year, WEIR pinpointed areas that needed collective examination and action to understand what is causing the inequity and what can be done to remediate it. Priorities this year included addressing transportation gaps for equitable access to out-of-school time programming, citywide broadband access so that students and their families can learn and live connected to the 21st century resources that they need, expansion of WU Labs beyond proof of concept so that more students have enriching programming. WER's membership also grew as new partners came to the table. We focus on incorporating direct parent representation to better understand the lived experiences of families, their goals and barriers, and how students are impacted. As Jen mentioned, WU Labs continues to expand its network and programs are raising the bar on quality. With support from the Hanover Insurance Foundation, Hanover Fellows, who are energized college students that mirror the populations of the programs that are serving children, are embedded into each WU Labs program to provide direct support in project-based learning and quality growth. This year, the network grew from 5 to 11 partners, serving over 1,500 students, kindergarten through 6th grade. It continues to draw local, state, and now national attention as a promising model of enrichment, empowering young students with student-led, culturally affirming, project-based learning. Students lead their learning and deeply explore topics of interest over extended time, culminating in project showcases. What's happening along the way? Well, students get excited about their learning and they get their vegetables, so to speak. This rich learning is chock full of connections to state standards and skill development in language, literacy, STEM, social studies, and social emotional competency. Students have opportunities to hone their communication skills as they craft their own plays, learn about scientific concepts as they design and build their own water filtration systems, and expand their understanding of history and civics as they prepare presentations of their community heroes. This vibrant learning honors each student's capacities and potential. WEC and the Worcester Education Equity Roundtable are deeply grateful to the community and to our funders for investing and now scaling the model. Since its launch in 2021, WU Labs has garnered nearly $700,000 of funding that spans local family foundations, corporate grants, and multi-year school district support. Let's keep growing. This summer, we also welcomed a new superintendent, Dr. Monárrez, who sits in partnership at the WER table, seeking input and charting a path forward with the community. To get started, we had to provide the superintendent with some out-of-school time supplies. WER created a briefing book organized by quadrant, containing profiles of every community-based program offering services to Worcester Public School students. Next, we boarded the bus and began mini tours of programs so that Dr. Monárrez and her leadership team could see programs in action and understand how students' learning extends into the after-school hours. It is a privilege to work alongside Dr. Monárrez and soon even more members of her team to address issues of policy and practice and lift bright spots in student learning and support. WER looks forward to continuing to be a thought partner and resource to Dr. Monárrez and the district as we co-construct the learning ecosystem in Worcester. Looking ahead, WER continues to ask critical questions, seek data to understand, and generate actionable recommendation. It is no accident that we're poised for an inflection point, as this community cares deeply about its students and their families. Worcester understands that the most precious resource we have is our students, and each student represents unimaginable potential. The Worcester Education Equity Roundtable stands ready to ensure each student, particularly underserved and historically marginalized students, have equitable access to what they need to realize their full potential. I want to extend a huge thank you to WER's partners because your engagement matters. As you can see, there is a lot happening and there's still more to do. So it is with great anticipation that we welcome tonight's special guest, Ron Walker, to fill our bucket of understanding of how we can empower students. It is an honor to introduce Ron this evening. Ron Walker has over 5 decades of experience serving as teacher, principal, staff developer, and consultant in various educational communities. Currently, Mr. Walker serves as the executive director and is a founding member of the Coalition of Schools Educating Boys of Color. The mission of COSEBOC, founded in 2007, is to connect, inspire, support, and strengthen school leaders dedicated to the social, emotional, and academic development of boys and young men of color. COSEBOC is recognized as a critical organization in efforts to eliminate the academic achievement gap. In this regard, recognition has come from many organizations, such as the Council of Great City Schools, Education Trust, Cities United, the Center for Law and Social Policy, the Panasonic Foundation, the Kirwan Institute, Harvard University, and the American Public Health Association, just to name a few. COSEBOC has been awarded major national grants by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the Open Society Foundation. We look forward to hearing from Ron shortly, but before we do, the WEC community would like to recognize Ron's outstanding contribution to the field of education with a very special award. Here to present the award are two members of the extended WEC family, Isaiah and Joshua Waddell, sons of board member Ron Waddell. Take it away.
1, 2, 3, go.
The Apple of a Different Color Award is presented periodically by the WEC to visionary leaders in K-12 education. Past recipients of this honor are John Bassett, former president of Clark University and Heritage University and founder of WEC, and John B. King Jr., Secretary of Education under President Obama and currently President of the Education Trust. For his passion, radical truth-telling, and vision for what is possible in education, the Apple of Different Color is presented to Ron Walker. Thank you, Mr. Walker, for all that you do and for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Young Kings. Thank you very much. You've made my day already. Thank you very much. And it's really an honor. First of all, let me thank my good friend Jennifer Davis for extending the invitation months back. I'm glad I was able to be here with you, and hearing this amazing story of what's going on in Worcester just really lifts me as an educator of lo these many years, 5 decades to be exact. And I've seen many, attempts at trying to bring full education to everyone. So what I'm hearing about this Worcester moment that will soon transform into the Worcester movement is just really fantastic. And I really, really applaud you all, your new superintendent, and all the leadership and community. Before I start sharing, I like to, as I often want to do when I do presentations, is to lift up some libations. We stand on shoulders of family, of those mentors, guides, those teachers. Think about those teachers that you might have had coming up who inspired you to do what you are, to be who you are today. The ancestors who just continually shed wisdom and vision to us. We're not creating a new path. Some of this path has been created, but we're taking it another step, and Worcester's taking it another step. So I just want to take time to acknowledge all those ancestors, all those teachers, family members, anyone who had anything to do with you, with me, and how we've developed. I also want to say, to the two young men and to the future, which is our students, that we want to do everything we can to make sure that the pathway is less rutted, but it's better paved for you as you go forward. And I also want to acknowledge those who lived on the land before we did. The stage was set for us to really take it further. So thank you. So with the help of Julia, I'm going to talk a little bit. My topic is educating all students in the era of pandemics. Now, I don't have to tell anyone that we are in a very different time. Not only the COVID pandemic, but Julia, if you go to the next one too, because I want to talk about this person here. But we're all in pandemics that have influenced who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And you just think about gun violence, depression, climactic, educational, and COVID. We are at a time talking about inflection points that we never faced before. So along comes some years ago, I won't tell you how, but a lot of years ago, there's Ron Walker. And when I look at this picture, that I've retrieved from my mother's files, I see what I see in those two young men: joy, happiness, wanting to learn, eager to learn, and just thinking that a bright future is going to be ahead. If we go to the next slide, please. And none of that would have been done if it wasn't for two individuals that started me on my way. Dolores Walker, Dolores's dream. Her dream was to become an educator, but she grew up in the Jim Crow South and was unable to get that kind of education that she fully deserved. Even though she won a partial scholarship, even though she had an oratorical contest that she won and Langston Hughes gave her a gift, she was unable to pursue her dream. But the dream was planted in me, because nightly, Dolores Walker would read something to me. When I was a little boy, I would always ask myself, why is mom reading this same poem to me nightly, every night? And some of you might have heard it before, but it was called Mother to Son. And it says, well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I've been a climbing on. I've been reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. For life for me ain't been no crystal stair. That's by the great Langston Hughes. And my mother used to recite that to me nightly, until finally, when I got of an age where I can talk to my mother and say, Mom, I now realize what you've been saying is you planted resilience in me, a young Black boy who's going to be facing adversities that I didn't realize, but she knew I'd be facing. To the other side, you see Solomon Walker. My father never went to school a day in his life, grew up in the Jim Crow South. But he said to me once, he said, son, although I never had a formal education as you, never could have a chance to read or to write, I know that one thing for sure, while I may be illiterate, I'm not ignorant. And I know, son, you're going to need an education. Really? So he devised a plan for me to get my education. And I'm so blessed that he did that, both my parents. If we go to the next one, please. So here you have a book that I wrote about my father, this uneducated man who helped his son to get an education. It's called Solomon's Plan, A Gift of Education from a Father to His Son by the American Reading Company. Soon to be released is my mother's book, Dolores's Dream, Education Delayed but Not Denied. And I lift up parents because parents are key to this educational endeavor that we're all on. You know, I value parents, I value parent engagement, parent participation. If it were not for my mother, you know, who came to my high school when my high school counselor called me into his office and said, Ron, I don't know whether or not college is for you. And I was 17 years old, about to be a senior in my senior year. I went home and told my mother. And why did I do that? Because the next day she got on the bus with me and went to my school, to Mr. Murray's office, the counselor, and said, Mr. Murray, in all due respect to you, my son is going to college. And if it were not for that parent intervention, I would not be here today and had the opportunity to do all I've been able to do. So parent involvement, parent engagement genuinely matters. Next one, please. Now, one of my mantras, we saw it in one of the earlier clips, is there is a difference between being educated and being schooled. Now, someone gave me a t-shirt. This is actually a t-shirt with a young man whose hat is to the side, and this is the image of a book, and it says, I'm educated, not schooled. And I often wear that. And I was to ask everybody in the audience, what's the difference from being educated and being schooled? I know you would know. And Kim, I'm looking at you shake your head, so I know you know, Kim, the difference between being educated and being schooled. You want to come off mute for a second and just tell me?
Oh, put me on the spot, Ron, huh?
That's the teacher in me.
Well, educated, you take it with you forever, and you taught how to think and to think for yourself and to use the resources around to make decisions for yourself. Schooled is being told what to think and how to think, and that is not what we're after in our education.
Exactly. Thank you, Kim. You get an A for that. And that's exactly what it is. You know, when someone is trying to just school our kids, that is for compliance. That is for non-thinking about the decisions that they're going to have to make in life. When we're talking about being educated, we're talking about being able to be discerning, critical thinking, being able to make decisions in tough circumstances. And as Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So we want that total education of the young person, not schooling. Next, please. Now here we see this young man, Ron Walker. This is back when I started my teaching career in Philadelphia. And I happened to be a young teacher at the same school that educated me. So some of the same teachers that educated me, they now saw me coming back. And part of what I'm saying here is that I had, because of my parents, because of the education that I received at an HBCU, Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, which was also the same school that Langston Hughes, Thurgood Marshall attended, I was really ready to teach. I was really ready to go. And, you know, you can see my students, I think they were engaged. I think they were listening to me at the point, but I love teaching it. What am I saying here? That great teaching matters. You know, when you take on that mantle of being a teacher, it's not a job, first of all, it's a calling. And I believe that I was called to teach. I believe that I was infused with that by my parents. And that when I got to the classroom every day, my main undertaking and challenge and opportunity was, what am I going to pass on today that can be part of this education enterprise for these young people? So I was happy to say that I was a successful teacher for 10 years in Philadelphia. If we go next, please. So I came to Massachusetts by way of a fellowship, the National Urban Fellows Program. And initially I didn't want to go, you know, when they gave us the choice of cities, they said New York, Washington, DC, Los Angeles, and Boston. I said, oh, I want to go to Los Angeles. I want to go to New York. But, you know, again, my calling was to come to Boston. 1978, I came to Boston just as they were going through the bus desegregation period. But I was here principal in an elementary K-8 school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they were undergoing voluntary desegregation. I was the principal of the Peabody Elementary School, located on Linnean Street, right around the corner from Harvard University. And when I was interviewed, they asked me, when I say they, the interviewing committee of parents and teachers, one teacher asked me a question that really was to change the direction of the course of my life, although I think it was probably already directed. He said, Mr. Walker, if you are selected to be principal of the Peabody Elementary School, what will you do with Black boys? I said, wow. I said, I have an answer for you. Same thing I'm gonna do with white boys, educate them. But I knew at that point in time that there was concern because with the voluntary desegregation, this school, which was right in the heart of Harvard, and most of the students were either family or connected to parents who went to Harvard, and I was suddenly going to get an influx of students of color, that I knew that I wanted to raise up the expectations that all students can learn. Ron Edmonds said that, not me. All students were going to learn, and we were going to make this a successful undertaking. So I'm happy to say that I was able to do some things that I think we made that mark, made success during my years of 10 years as a principal. If we go to the next one, please. Here are some of my beliefs. Now, I got a whole lot of them, but here are some of my beliefs. All children and youth can and must excel in school, holding high expectations. Just think about those of us who are on this call, if it were not for the expectations, not only of your parents or your fictive kin or your neighbors, your counselors, your mentors, but some teachers that said, you're only going to get the best, and I'm going to expect the best. Relationships matter. because you can't teach a student you don't know. You can't teach a student you don't want to know. You got to really understand how powerful relations are critically important to the education enterprise. Parents, families, communities must be welcomed, honored, and invited to join in the education of children and youth. It was fundamental to me that parents and families had to be welcome. Just like if Jennifer invites me over her house tomorrow for dinner, I know Jennifer is going to welcome me. She's going to have it spread out. I'm just going to feel like, oh man, I'm at home. But this is fundamentally important, this premise for me. Number 4, educators can teach children if they don't love. How can you teach somebody you don't love? So love has to be part of this enterprise. This is not a cold activity we're doing. You got to love it. You got to love the children in front of you. Of course, all educators must be qualified. They must have their cultural representation too. When students see teachers that look like them, that's the hope. That's the aspiration. That's the dream. When I saw a teacher that looked like me, I said, I can do that. I can be that. And they must be culturally proficient. All schools must have quality resources. Not should, must. And it's so good to hear that, with the ESSER money and the money that's coming from the federal and state coffers, that Worcester has resources, because all schools should be resourced. Positive, caring atmosphere, academically rigorous. You feel like you want to run to school, right? Not loathe, but you want to love going to school. And all students should be supported and affirmed, now more than ever. With this pandemic, we're seeing an increase in suicides, increase in depression and anxiety. Now more than ever, both our student population, our adults, must have those supports to help them to really deal with the changing times. Next one, please. Now, along the way to the forum, so to speak, after X number of years in public education as a teacher, as an assistant principal, as a principal, something happened to me, and it really started to come together. And these are some of the inspiration points that I started connecting the dots. And as I told you, one dot was my mother's encouragement, my father's encouragement, that mother to son poem. Another dot was at 9 years old, I saw Emmett Till grotesque body in a magazine when I was 9. That was now you can do the math how old I am now, but I was 9. That was 1955. And I opened a magazine that was in my grandmother's house. And I couldn't figure out what I was seeing. I took it to my mother. And I said, what happened? What is this? In my own little, boyish ways. And she said, this young man allegedly did something he wasn't supposed to do. And I didn't know what any of that meant at 9. But I said, Mom, where did this happen? She said, in Mississippi. In my mind, I said, I never want to go to Mississippi, because I never want that to happen to me. But as fate has it, when I was 18 years old, when I was 19, 20 years old, my class at Lincoln University was led by an iconic civil rights leader, James Farmer. And for those who have your Google, your phone, you'll find out that he was he walked alongside Martin Luther King, and he started the Congress of Racial Equality to desegregate buses going to the South. And he was a teacher on sabbatical for a year at Lincoln University. And he said to the young men in that class, you guys need to do something. You need to go to Mississippi and maybe feed the hungry and just really do something. This was in the midst of the civil rights movement. 1967, I found myself in Belzoni, Mississippi. Little did I know that I was going to be there when I was 9. At 19, I was in Belzoni, Mississippi, seeing racism, seeing poverty up close and personal. That made an impression on me. After seeing Emmett Till, after hearing Mother to Son, and now I'm in Mississippi. I started to see these dots connected. So my counselor, I told you about that story about Mr. Murray, who said I couldn't go to college, okay? So I went on to my education, and I'm blocking out here. I want to see, maybe I need to get a bigger view so I can see the full screen. because I'm loving seeing folks, but I'm not that seeing what I wrote down here. My education, Julie, what did that slide say? My education.
At HBCU and study of Frederick Douglass.
Okay, all right. So that study of Frederick Douglass, and I learned about Frederick Douglass that he was an abolitionist who was enslaved. Now the difference again, when we talk about culturally responsive teaching, he was enslaved, but made a slave, but he was enslaved. He didn't walk into it freely. But his master's wife taught Frederick Douglass how to read. The master caught Frederick Douglass reading one day and beat him severely. And Frederick Douglass said in his autobiography, if I was going to be beat because I'm learning how to read, well, I'm going to learn how to read. So that inspired me. The trip to Mississippi, as you see here. The more research as I began to become a young teacher, I started seeing and reading about the achievement gap and this widening gap, especially with boys and young men of color being at the bottom of that gap. That started to connect. The rising suspension and expulsion rate of Black and brown males leading to the pathway to prison, that started to resonate. And then what happened that really sort of helped me to think about starting COSEBOC and connecting all these dots was my memories of losing two Black students. One by the name of Wendell Holliday, my 7th grade class, very bright young man. And one day Wendell came to me and said, Mr. Walker, we're moving. We're going to another school in another part of Philadelphia. I said, Wendell, you've been doing great. Keep on doing great. He said, Mr. Walker, I am. I'm going to be president of the United States. I said, okay. So about 2 weeks later, I get a phone call and said Wendell Holliday had been murdered. He'd been killed in the gang fight. First student, I was 22, 23 years old. First student, I lost. Kevin Johnson, my next student, equally bright, equally brilliant. And what happened with Kevin? Also had the same trajectory. I said, Kevin, you can be great. You're an A student. He said, Mr. Walker, I'll be fine. I'm good. So when I left Philadelphia, coming to Boston, I lost track of Kevin. Kevin found me, but he found me because he was in a penitentiary, incarcerated for life for allegedly murdering somebody. The story continues that Kevin and I have been writing for 35 years. Kevin will be released from that prison soon because the person who accused him of murdering somebody recanted the story. She was a drug addict and said, I framed him because I wanted the drugs that were in that house. While Kevin was incarcerated, he got his GED, he's a paralegal, and he was the one who orchestrated the invitation for the prison to invite me to give the keynote speech to 200 men who were getting their GED. So I'll stop right there to say all of that culminated, and we can go to the next slide, that allowed me to say, I need to do something. And that doing something was starting a coalition of schools educating boys of color. And here you see our core document called Standards, the Uncommon Core for Schools Educating Boys of Color. This is a blueprint for any school system or district that wants to make sure that their boys, young men of color are educated. But more than that, once you do that, it lifts up all students. Every student gets a beneficiary. So that's one of the courses that we now teach. Can we go to the next slide? I know my time is getting short. And I want you to see these two videos before we close. Now, our mission since 2007 is also to advance the social, emotional, cultural, and academic development of boys, young men of color. And see, when we do that, all students also succeed as well, because that's what we should be doing for every student. But in particular, this is our niche. This is where we work. Next one, please. And as I said at the beginning, there's multiple pandemics in our lives. You can see them. We're at an inflection point that now is the time. Tomorrow is too late. Now is the time for a moment like Worcester to become a movement, to really become a model of what we need to do around this nation, to address all these in the respective ways, because all these things are impacting the lives of our students and their families and our communities. So if we had more time, we can go into them, but I know time is at the premium. Can we go to the next one, please? So, because I want you to see something. This is evidence of our work. this school, and you'll see about a 4-minute clip of a father talking to his son. This school in North Carolina was one of our award schools because of the work that the principal was doing to really change the narrative for all students. And so let's go to this and listen to what this father is saying about his son.
I just noticed the change over the years. We've been working with him at home, but I've also known in school that it's been a difference in his attitude.
When I go home, my family teaches me something like, don't try to start fights at school and try to be nice to each other. And then when we go to school the next day, it's just saying the same thing over again. So that makes me think that school is really teaching me what I should learn.
Is school helping you to help him?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
Was it like that before?
Nah, I really didn't know what was going on. And when I come to ask, it was more confusion going on. I don't know how the school was. Yeah, it wasn't nothing like that before. Like I said, it was a lot of dysfunction, disorganization. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't.
Do you think their expectations were as high for your son then as they are now in this school?
No. I don't know.
Let me feel.
It kind of angered me, to be honest with you, because I didn't really care about what was going to teach him or not, and that's the truth. And now you could tell it's more concerned about the children's growth. You know, it's more about learning, it's experience. You know what I'm saying? It's about their success right now. I know he's a challenge. He don't give up quick. Very, outspoken when it was to be like what he don't like.
You almost emotionally talking about him.
Yeah, that's a boy. Yeah, and he got big dreams.
About his big dreams.
I said I wanted to be a genetic engineer.
A genetic engineer?
And before that.
Before that, I wanted to be a doctor.
Any genetic engineer?
No, it isn't. He's not. He always drink like my child. He always want something about. I ain't gonna push you that. But you run that stuff out there about that. He been doing his reels. So I'm proud of him. I'm like, as far as it goes, what need to give it to him. I want you to success or assign something.
Big dreams right here.
I get the big dreams. Flag books. When I was like, I was like, wow, one or two. And then when I read another book, wow, be there.
When you hear Dad, he said he's proud of you. You think, what are you doing? You're not disappointed.
What's wrong with you? What you think about it?
You said about me.
What's that about?
That you want to grow and become
whatever you do.
I think that video speaks for itself. Every time I see it, I'm on the verge, because that is what it's all about for every student and for us boys and young men of color. And you see in family engagement, very often it's been the accusation that Black fathers aren't around their sons. There can be nothing more further than the truth. And you saw it here. And so if we go to the next one, I think the next one is the last slide, I believe, and it's also a video. Because before we play it, my work and the work of COSEBOC is to make sure that we do everything we can to educate, to empower, to collaborate with any organization, school districts that want to make sure that all students, and especially students of color, in our case, boys, thrive and survive. And so this video was made, some of you may have seen it shortly after, I think, George Floyd, but let's play this and this will be conclusion.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just wanna live. God protect me. I'm a young Black man, doing all that I can to stand all the and I see what's being done to my kind. Every day, I'm being haunted and prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. God protect me. So many thoughts in my head. Will I live or will I end up dead? It's an unease or sequel. No matter where I be, there's no place safe for me. Oh, I'm not asking for too much. So Lord, please help. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. God protect me. This is my battle cry. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to share this conversation. And I think that concludes my time.
Thank you so much, Ron, for being here with us this evening. That was tremendously powerful. And we really appreciate it. This is truly, as you have reminded us, both the work of the head and the work of the heart. It is the work of sharing not just the lives of the kids, but with sharing our lives with them. So thank you so much. We are now going to move to the second part of our program, which is a conversation that will be moderated by two folks who I think most of you know. And as soon as I lost my screen, sorry. Moderating our conversation between Ron and Superintendent Monárrez is Tu Nguyen. Tu is a proud Vietnamese refugee, an artist, a youth worker, and the first non-binary candidate and city council at large member. Tu came to Worcester at the age of 1 when their family immigrated to the United States as refugees. Tu grew up in Maine South and graduated from Claremont Academy and Clark University. Over the years, they have dedicated their career to serving our young people and to serving Worcester overall. Superintendent Monárrez has been with us about 3 months now, maybe 4. and believes in the possibilities of every child. This is her approach to her work. This is her approach to community. And with that, too, I'm going to lob it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen, and good evening, everyone. I just want to thank the Worcester Education Collaborative for inviting me into this space to facilitate this amazing conversation between Ron and our new superintendent, Dr. Monárrez. Today I'll be filling in for a dear friend of mine, Raquel Castro, who was unfortunately in a tragic car accident over the weekend and couldn't make it here tonight. And, I know many of us know Raquel personally. And, Raquel has dedicated so many years and decades into this work, as well as shaping the youth work landscape in Worcester. I know her heart and spirit is here with us tonight. And I just wanted to take a few seconds to send her our thoughts and prayers for her healing journey. I know she would appreciate it if we pull her in this space. And, as Ron said, relationship is so important. And I know, let's just take a few moments just to send her and bring her in. Thank you, everyone. I hope I do her justice tonight with this conversation. And I welcome you all back into the space. I know we're a little bit low on time, so we'll just get right in with the discussion. First off, we'll start with our new superintendent, Dr. Monárrez. Thank you so much for being here. I know Worcester was so glad to have you. I know I was a super fan. I was really excited to have you come through. And so, first off, I'd love to hear, your thoughts on Ron's remarks. What came up for you as you were listening to Ron?
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the moment of silence for Raquel. That's very special. Ron, you brought up lots of different kind of emotions and thoughts in my head as I listened and reflected on the purpose of education, how we see and don't see some children and not all children, how we criminalize our youth intentionally or unintentionally. And so, I would say my greatest reminder of what you shared with us is to keep working each and every day to see all children as children with possibilities, as children with assets and strengths, as children who have needs at times, because they're humans, and humans have all kinds of needs, whether that's an academic need, a fist pump, a high five, whatever it takes for them to know that we love them, we care about them, they're safe and cared for, and we see their brilliance, and then to help them to have that brilliance shine. So the video choices were very powerful. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I completely agree with, the little interactions that really, builds that relationship, and the reminder that, they're students, but they're humans, when they're in the classroom, when they're walking in the streets. And so, Ron, I really wanted to ask you, how do you see the role of community and what you expressed as love, in the enterprise of education? One of the quotes that you said that really struck me is that you can't teach if you don't love. And so how do we pull that in?
Well, civil rights movement, they talked about the beloved village. We've also heard the term, it takes a whole village to raise a child. Those of us who are old enough to remember, there was those fictive kin. Now, fictive kin, no one biological, but there's a neighbor across the street who used to stop and say, Ron, how you doing in school? I believe that can be recreated. Mm-hmm. I started a program a few years ago with a friend of mine, Dr. Karen Mapp, called Starting School Differently. Being in education for 5 decades, we know that there's this traditional rhythms that we do every year. Same way open, same way we close. So I said, Karen, suppose we try to start school differently. let's involve parents and community. And what we did, we had a pilot school in Philadelphia, and we asked the principal, and she said, let's go for it, inner city school. And we said, let us pilot this with two teachers who will be receiving new students in the new school year. And so what we did in July, when school closed, we sent every parent in those two classes invitations. Now, in the inner city, oftentimes when parents get communications, they say, well, what did my child do? That was the mindset until they opened the envelope up and said, this is an invitation to come to a special meeting where they're saying, you are the child's first teacher, and the child's new teacher wants to learn from you. And so we had parents that come in on that warm day in August, and we had those two teachers that we had refreshments, of course, as part of the welcoming. And we had each parent had an opportunity with each teacher to be interviewed by the teacher. And for example, I would say, Miss Carey, what's your son's favorite thing that he likes to do for fun? Or Miss Carey, does your son have a nickname? Miss Carey, what does he not like? And by the end of that 45 minutes or whatever the time was, that teacher had learned that much more about that student. And so you can imagine when school started, the repository of information that teacher A had about all the students in that classroom that were coming in new, and so the students were surprised. How did they know? How does teacher know so much about me? It's the first day of school. And what it did, it increased parent involvement because parents were appreciated for the knowledge that they had about their child. Too often, the traditional format of school, we make that last. We set aside so this whole notion of starting school differently, that's one term. And then the other term I had for involving parents and community. When I was a principal, I used to say to my cafeteria workers, my custodians, the school crossing guard, that you are part of my faculty. You are my community faculty. You don't have to have a BA in teaching or MED. The fact that you have wisdom that you can share with students coming through the doors is important. So the extension to the community where we're making the acknowledgement that community members can be community faculty. So I have a great deal of value that I want to place on the role of community.
Wow, I love that. I love bringing in all the tiers of folks. And even when you mention the faculty, the ones that we sometimes overlook or, didn't, create a warm environment. I think a lot about our labor movements and how if they also felt welcomed and invested in the students because we invest in them, that creates a culture, a movement. And so, Dr. Monárrez, how can those responsible for building and contributing to an equitable system of education identify or cultivate alliances? How do we invite people in the way that Ron was just saying, and how do you see that happening in Worcester?
So you start just by listening.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, you've got to create a space for that listening, right? So you are intentional about creating meeting spaces where people understand that they are there to share. And so you ask questions more than you tell. Mm-hmm. And then you state back, so these are the themes I'm hearing. Is there anything else that's missing, right? And you just start engaging with people, not as the educator, not as Dr. Monárrez or whomever else is in some fancy leadership position, but as a human engaging with another human and seeing them as people who have so much to offer, and then listening and learning with them. That's how you start it. That's how you do it. That's how you model it. That's what's happening right now in Worcester from me. And with time, that's what's going to happen with the schools and the families and the children that we serve. So the leader has to start it. The leader has to model it. The leader has to be vulnerable and courageous and willing to say, great point, don't have all the answers, but I do believe in us. I do believe in us doing it together. And I'm okay with it getting kind of dirty and a little, muddy and some bruises here and there, because at the end, it's always going to come out better. So that's what I believe wholeheartedly. That's what I've experienced in my many years of being an educator. And honestly, that's what I want as a woman. That's how I want people to treat me. And so that real basic rule that we all learned way back when we were very young children was treat people the way that you want to be treated. That's a guiding principle.
This makes me think a lot about like rituals of like having a circle, right? Like having all of us on the same level playing field. I think we've been so conditioned by capitalism and all these things to be in a hierarchy, like one person's on top and it's a pyramid of, exploitation or, ways in which we have authority over each other. And what both of you are really talking about is a circle. A circle in which we're a village. You have an expertise, I have an expertise, someone does this, the other person does that, and we could come together to build solutions. And so, Ron, I have a question for you. I imagine you've done a lot of, listening and a lot of circles. And so, how do we ensure that equity prevails and, that we really don't marginalize, any young person or group, especially young men of color?
Well, I think one of the things, and I agree very much with what you said, Rachel. I'm coming from the same cloth in terms of listening. Being vulnerable and being humble is not a weakness. And leaders that do that, they really show how strong they encourage they are. But I think, listening well, to just carry that on, the young people is the first line of I want to touch, to hear their voices about equity. They know what equity is. They know what it means to be fairly treated, right? So incorporating the voices of young people in the equation and the dialogue as often as possible, not just marginalized or not just having communities say, well, we have 2 young people here, but have them actively involved in defining and discerning what it is, have them taking polls. We're starting something called the COSEBOC Youth Ambassador Corps, because we want young people to be the ambassadors to the community. They know the community, they know what's needed, they know what their peers need to know, be able to do and understand. So I think as much as, the investment that we make, and, I think the song, I think Whitney Houston sang it, since Jennifer loves music, the greatest. I believe that children are our future. Teach them well, let them lead the way, let them empower young people. And we will be able to see that they can make those connections around equity. So even on committees that we have that are equity focused, do we have any young voices on that? Who are our youth equity ambassadors? How are they engaged?
Mm-hmm. Definitely bringing them in as a stakeholder and allowing them to be stakeholders, right? And making sure that they know they are stakeholders in this. But it was very interesting, Ron, when you mentioned the Whitney Houston song. Actually, that was a song I remember in elementary, like we would be singing every day. Mm-hmm. And so it made me think about the poem that your mom would sing to you. Mm-hmm. And so I think, with that, I would ask one question to both of y'all. And then we would open it up to the audience, which is, during this time, what are the issues that you are seeing our young folks are facing, and what is the role in education during this time? Because I know that could be a long, conversation, but I really wanted to open that up for both of y'all to share.
Do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go, Rachel?
Okay. So in my mind, the role of education is always and will always be opportunity and access. Opportunity to stellar programs, opportunity to experience learning situations, whether that's inside of the classroom, outside the school, in the community, it doesn't matter, but just access to different ways of learning different ways of experiencing what life can offer. So that, like that young boy, you know, he had access through books and learned lots of different things that he might want to do with his life. I forget what kind of engineer he wanted to be, but I didn't know what that engineer, I still don't exactly know what kind of engineer that is. You know, just opportunity to know what's out there, to look beyond your existing reality and to dream really big, and then access to lots of different learning experiences, courses, after school programming, summer programming, internships, workforce development, whatever that might be. The opportunity, the access brings knowledge, it brings hope, and it just allows an individual to continue to dream beyond what any of us could possibly consider. So those are, it's always about opportunity and access. And I would just end with, and what opportunity and access means for one is not exactly the same for somebody else, right? And so then that's the equity piece, that some children need more. They might need more access, they might need more opportunity, they might need more time, and they need to get what they need in order to be, to thrive.
I echo what Rachel said. What I would add is, this is the first time ever that we're having students who will be graduating from high school, college, who've had 2 years away from the social enterprise we call education. We don't know what that's going to mean down the road. But I think it's imperative that we place the necessary cocooning or wraparound supports for students who are going through a time like never before. And so I fully embrace and support what Rachel said about the opportunity. No question about that. And by the same token, to enable us to have a better way of doing assets inventory of the gifts of all students. Every student has a gift. Every student is gifted and talented. And for us to be able to inventory those assets and be able to have those opportunities that match up with student interest is incumbent upon us now more than ever. But to wrap students around with that love, to notice students, the sense of belonging, and to understand that difference is not bad, just to keep on having these restorative circles, that's almost the way we need to start every day. Every day. As part of the belief that, we want to do, as my friend Bettina Love says, we want to allow students to freedom dream. Because the opposite of freedom dream, she says, is spirit murdering, which has happened in the past when students' spirit was murdered because they weren't noticed, they weren't lifted up, they weren't supported. So we want to make sure that freedom dreaming is the order of the day going forward in education. Thank you
for that. I definitely agree. I'm a youth worker myself. I've been doing youth work for the last 10 years. And, I think about what y'all said earlier about listening, right? And listening to the needs, as our superintendent was saying, like listening to their needs so that we know how to wrap around them, to really, just to bring Raquel back, who was supposed to facilitate this. She always talked about, a candle for the youth, how we have to be the hands that cover the candle to allow the light to keep going, and so I think about the geniuses that we all carry and how we need to keep fostering it and seeing that. And once they see it, they believe it, and they could pass on that light to other folks. And so with that, we'll be transitioning to some audience questions. I'll be looking in the chat. So the first one I see is, the teacher's contract has little, if any, requirement to meet with families. What actions can be taken to allow teachers to meet more frequently with families? And I assume that's to you, Doctor.
Yeah, great question. So As you know, a teacher contract is a negotiated item. So there's some things, of course, that I wouldn't be able to speak about here tonight. But what I can tell you in terms of what's happening for Worcester Public Schools is school committee has approved a job description for family and community engagement director. That position is currently flying. It actually closes this Friday. And so we're going to be hiring for that. And the intent behind that is to have models, at least I want my schools to be able to choose, right? So I'll have this director pull together a committee and come up with a family engagement guidebook that then will have a few models of what strong family engagement looks like and sounds like at our schools. Right now, I know I saw Patty Padilla here. She's a principal at Woodland Elementary. She's got a fabulous family engagement model. We need to have that not at isolated schools, but district-wide. So something we are definitely working on. And when our educators and our parents really come together and that synergy really happens, then it's not even something that has to be in the contract. It's just what we do because we know it works, right? So that is in the works for Worcester Public Schools.
Yes, thank you for allocating resources. That's what I love to hear is like investment. Like, it won't come out of nowhere unless we invest the resources to bring it in.
I know I've got a few committee members on here. I think I saw member Mailman and member Clancy, so I want to thank them. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for Ron, I have a question from Nellie. Parents like myself are interested in implementing grassroots efforts to support our children. Much of Worcester's funding for boys specifically go to organizations to prevent recidivism, not necessarily prevention and early years mentoring. What are some programs that address violence prevention and mentoring that can serve as a model and reference for parents like myself that we can advocate?
Great question. And so Nellie, there's a couple of things, something that we do, and then I'm going to also refer a name of an organization that we've worked with that was Boston-based, led and founded by my friend who now City Council at Large woman, Julia Mejia. C-Plan. C-Plan is a wonderful model a collaborative model of parents who are working in service of making sure that the education landscape and life landscape for their students, their children, is fair and equitable. So, that's easy connection to make. If you don't have that connection, I can certainly help out with that. But that would be who I might consult with in terms of a model, that's already in place that can be replicated. My friend Noe Medina, who I know some folks know, who works with us, has the connections as well, who can share that information. But that's the one starting point, just to get that framework. We do a rite of passage program for young men that we call DRUM. And the DRUM stands for Developing Rituals, Understanding Manhood. See, because oftentimes young men of color are seeking any identity that might fit, particularly if they're lost and confused, right? So when we see a lot of gun violence or a lot of gang activity, oftentimes these young men are finding that that's where I can find my identity. But that's not the identity we want them to have. And so this DRUM program, and we've been experiencing doing rite of passage for years, but we have a little twist on it now. First, we originally did it directly to groups of young men, which is still good. We still can do that. But what we do now, during this era of virtual and whatnot, is we work directly with the men who are working with the young men. And we put the men through their own rite of passage because we want to make sure they understand their own past trauma, what has hindered them in their life, and what do they need to release in order to be effective working as mentors with young men. So we've done this in school districts in New Jersey. We're about to sign a contract in Boston, where we're going to be working with cohorts of men who have answered the call to be either a mentor or a facilitator or coach of young men but first they're going to go through it themselves. That way, we believe that when they meet the young men, that they're authentic. They know why they're there. They know why they were called. So you can find information on that on our website. And that's something that we do specifically called Drum.
Thank you so much for those resources, Ron. And I hope you contract into Worcester too, because we definitely need that program. I think a lot about, young men of color who, I think often don't get that much resources, as Nellie mentioned. And I think we're at a place where, I think masculinity and vulnerability and all the things that you mentioned is just so desperately needed. And it exists, it exists. How do we foster it? And make sure that young men of color feel that they have the resources, community, and strength to, be in their fullness as well. And so I'm sorry, folks. I know there was one more question. We will be ending this portion, so I'm really sorry. Hopefully we could actually connect your question to the panelists later. I'll be sending this back to Jen, and I want to thank you both for having an amazing conversation with me and being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you too. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Ron. And thank you to the members of the WEC board, including our new members. Thank you to our sponsors, and special thanks again to United Way. And I will get my office in order sometime now in the next few days, now that the annual meeting is over. I promise you that, Tim. In closing, I would like to say, I'd like to offer first a reminder and then ask some questions. As a reminder, we each have our part, our particular part, based on our lived experience, based on our professional experience, based on our interests in this essential and vital work. I ask you, what is yours? What is your contribution? What will you contribute to the work towards excellence and equity at this critical moment? Once again, quoting my friend Bruno Mars, how will you show up and how will you show out? So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in the work. And good evening, everyone. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.